Welcome everyone to our presentation today. As everyone knows, on Monday is the home opener and Eclipse Day. So hey, all right. So with the new manager and some great new additions to the team, we are interested in to see how this new season will unfold. If you don't know, Mary Coleman, Judge Jeff Saffold's bailiff, a longtime friend of the courts, and also a friend and longtime friend of Bobby DiBiasio, she's going to introduce him. But Bobby is a senior vice president of public affairs for the Cleveland Guardians, and get this, having spent 45 years doing it for the Indians and now Guardians. So with that being said, I am going to turn it over to our very own Mary Coleman to introduce Bobby DiBiasio.
Well, he already told you just what I was going to say. I think if you're here, you already know Bobby, you know who he is. He was assistant PR director in '79, director the following year, and then vice president in '88, and has been with the team since then. He's team spokesperson, team ambassador, head of Alumni Association, and president of the Cleveland Guardians Charities. And aside from that, just an all-around great guy and a wealth of knowledge. And here is Bob DiBiasio.
All right, Mary.
Hello, everybody. I probably won't stand behind this too often. Being Italian, you got to walk and talk with your hands. It's always a treat. We try to do this every year at the start of the baseball season. And as Judge indicated, Monday will be opening day. Believe it or not, it'll be our 31st opening day at Progressive Field. You know, we're 30 plus years old. It's remarkable. We're going through a whole lot of renovations, which I'll talk about in a second. The other thing that's pretty remarkable is this opening day will begin the 124th season of baseball in Cleveland as a member of the American League. We are one of the oldest institutions in this city. Professional baseball started in the city of Cleveland in Northeast Ohio in 1869. Think about that. 4 years after the end of the Civil War, there was professional baseball being played in this city. And I always think when I wake up on opening day, what the people in 1901 in the city of Cleveland were thinking about on opening day 1901, our first year in action, when we were named the Cleveland Blues. For those of you who may not know, in 1901, we were the Cleveland Blues or the Bluebirds, depending upon which of the 5 newspapers that were in Cleveland at that time, what they called us. The story goes that the very next year, 1902, the players didn't like the pale blue uniforms that went along with Bluebirds. They didn't think it was manly enough, so they changed to black and white uniforms for 1902. And changed the name to the Broncos. Again, thinking that was a little bit more manly. Then in 1903, we stole the best player in baseball in the National League at that time. He played for Philadelphia. We signed him to a big contract back then. I think it was as much as $50,000, which is close, not quite what Shohei Ohtani is getting, $70 million a year with the Dodgers right now. But Napoleon Lajoie comes from Philadelphia to play in Cleveland. So the owners at that time wanted to make sure the fans of Cleveland knew that there was a star coming to Cleveland to get this inaugural baseball organization off to a wonderful start. And so they were called the Naps for Napoleon Lajoie. And then when he retired, they thought, okay, we need a new name. And the owner called in all the writers and asked them, help me figure out a new name. That's where it gets crazy. The mythology involved and how did we become the Indians You have 10 different historians, they'll give you 10 different stories as to what truly was the meaning behind Indians. Some think that the Boston Braves won the World Series the year before, so the Indian motif was lucky, and so let's call them the Cleveland Indians. Some think Louis Francis Sockalexis, who was the first full-blooded Native American to play baseball. If you think about the timing of that, he played for Cleveland in the late 1880s, and to have a Native American on a team with whites back then was as barrier-breaking as Larry Doby in 1947 joining the Cleveland Indians and breaking the color barrier in the American League just 3 months, 11 weeks after Jackie Robinson did so with the Brooklyn Dodgers. And so the Indians was the name. And then obviously just a few years ago, our organization internally made the decision to really take a deep dive as to what our name should be, and if we wanted to be involved in a serious aspect to diversity, equity, inclusion, how could we walk into meetings at City Hall and other places with the name Indians? How could we be named after a people and still embrace the concepts of DE&I? And so we did a huge deep dive on that, knowing we would make a lot of people mad, we would make a lot of people happy. I think it was the right thing to do. I always thought that when we moved from Cleveland Stadium to Jacobs Field, that Mr. Jacobs was going to make that move. And there was some discussions about that, and felt we aren't quite the championship caliber team, so let's not make waves quite yet. But Paul Dolan, with our leadership team, made the decision that it was important that we stand up and do the right thing. I think that's the easiest way to answer that question. It's we feel we did the right thing. Moving on to this year. I mentioned there's some renovations. It's a 2-year project. When you walk into our building this summer, you're going to see some things that are brand new, and they're going to be exciting, mostly in the upper deck. As I mentioned, we're 31 years into this building, and we really hadn't touched the upper deck much. We obviously redesigned the entire lower bowl with the corner bar, which is sold out most every game, the drink rails in left field, the 13 different local restaurants that dot our concourse in the lower level for our food and beverage presentation. We've really done some wonderful things to make our ballpark not only affordable but compelling entertainment. Upper deck, we just needed to do some things. And first and foremost, right field. If you know our ballpark, picture it, no more cargo boxes up in right field with the names and retired numbers. We're adding a group sales area up there that is just going to be off the charts. It's one thing we really hadn't done to perfection, was servicing groups. With the major companies in town, they come looking for 1,000 tickets so they can take their employees and their families to a ball game. And we had a tent outside on Carnegie Avenue behind the ballpark, behind the Discount Drug Mart Club, and they'd go and they eat and they'd mingle there, and then they go in the ballpark and separate. That's not a good way to have a company outing and mingling and do the things that companies want to achieve when they have a group outing. So upper deck, we're going to have an area that is 1,500 large, or you can break it down into 25. Groups of 25. So we have a church group, a Little League team, family reunion, whatever group you might be involved in, service group wants to go to the ball game. We now have a beautiful presentation in the upper deck right field. That'll be a wristband area, so only people who have tickets for that area. It'll be specific to them. Upper deck left field, we've ripped out a number of seats, sections of seats, flattened it out for another social gathering spot. And obviously another place we can sell craft beer and all the things that our fans want from us. And so that one is open to any fan with any ticket. You find somebody, you text, hey, where are you? I'm at the ballpark. Oh, I'm in right. Let's go up to the upper deck in left field through new escalators that have been built. And you have a beautiful view of the lake, the skyline, and the ball game all in one. It's going to be fantastic. It won't be finished off until 2025. This, again, is a 2-year project. When you walk into our ballpark, you're going to see midnight navy blue seats, and you're going to see original green seats. We just weren't able to rip out 36,000 seats in one off season. It's an incredible task to rip seats that have been in place in cement for 30 years. So that's a 2-year project. But the whole ballpark is going to end up being midnight navy blue. What's going to happen in 2025, the Terrace Club, for those who've been to our ballpark and know the triangular glass windows down the left field line for the Terrace Club, that's closed for 2024. That's being ripped up and redesigned. It's going to be an open air area. For those of you who might have been to Top Golf or whatever, and behind where you golf, there's those couches and coffee table kind of setup. That's what it's going to be. And it's going to be a wristband area where your food, beverage, beer, wine is included in your ticket package. And we're going to sell those as season tickets if we can get to maximum capacity through a season ticket aspect. Underneath, opening in 2025, a whole new dugout suite area. I'm mentioning these things simply because for us to keep our tickets affordable, for us to continue to have a championship caliber team on the field, we need to make sure every bit of real estate in our ballpark is generating revenue for us. Everybody has a different pocketbook. There are some who want the experience at the highest level possible. That's what the new dugout club is going to be all about underneath. When you watch our games, you see those dugout suites. Well, we're ripping those up and building a big club behind it. And people will still walk in and still have seats actually closer to home plate than the pitcher. Pitcher 60 feet 6 inches from the rubber to home plate. Those seats are 55 feet from home plate. So you're closer to the hitter than the pitcher is. So you hear and feel the power of the game of baseball. Remarkable seats. We have the Calling Club upstairs as well. And then we have 34,000 seats for the general fan to enjoy the game in the manner in which they want to enjoy our ballpark. I mentioned food and beverage to you. I don't think anybody walks into Brown Stadium or Rocket Mortgage and the first thing on their mind is, what am I going to eat today? But you walk into a baseball ballpark, you walk into Progressive Field, one of the first things on your mind is, all right, what am I going to chow down on? And believe it or not, in Cleveland, hot dogs, right, still number one on the top seller list. But Momocho's pulled pork nachos are right behind. It is remarkable how many nachos we sell in the course of 6 months at our ballpark. It is truly remarkable. We look forward to turning over the next 30 years of this ballpark to our fans, as our goal is to always provide the total fan experience and put a product on the field that you can be proud of. If there's anything we learned today, and I'm going to quiz you, so be ready when we say goodbye, that we talk about a sustained winning culture at our place. We have the longest tenured owners in the history of Cleveland sports in the Dolan family. They have now owned the team through 24 seasons, and in those 24 seasons, you can determine in your own way if they've been successful in the win-loss column. They certainly have been incredibly successful in the community front. There's nobody that matches their commitment to this community. They're a 5-generation Cleveland family and have been doing philanthropic kindness for 5 generations. We feel so proud to be a part of the Dolan family and all the things. Over 270 engagements last year. We've touched over 400 organizations annually. Close to nearly 5,000 boys and girls get to play baseball and softball free of charge. I don't know if you're aware that if it wasn't for Cleveland Guardians Charities, there would be no high school baseball or softball in the city of Cleveland. We fund it completely, 100%. There was a phone call I got from Mr. Jackson, who was the athletic director many years ago, and he was in a budget meeting, and he called me. And this is right at the beginning of Larry Dolan's ownership, early 2000s. And he said, I hate to tell you, but we had a budget meeting, and there are only going to be 2 sports in the fall, 2 sports in the winter, and 2 sports in the spring. And in Cleveland, Ohio, because we have young women and men who get Division I scholarships, track is overtaking baseball and softball. And I said, when do you have to go back in that meeting? He said, we're on a recess for 15 minutes. I said, stay by the phone. I called Larry Dolan. No memos, no white papers. I said, Larry, I just got a distressing phone call from Mr. Jackson, the athletic director at the Cleveland schools. And he said there will be no more baseball or softball in the city of Cleveland. He was a player at St. Ignatius. He was a running back. He was a catcher, played in the charity game. For those old timers here that may remember the charity game at Thanksgiving at Cleveland Stadium, you'd get 30 to 50,000 people watching the East Senate, West Senate football championship on Cleveland Stadium. He actually threw a TD pass as a running back, intercepted a pass to win the game against East Tech, the first city championship for Iggy at that time. And he said, Bobby, can you imagine a young person not being able to play baseball or softball their senior year of high school for their school? And I said, no, sir, as a kid who played at Lakewood. And I said, no, sir, I can't. He goes, you tell them we'll fund it completely. Boom. That's all it took. That's the kind of people that own this franchise. They're remarkably committed. We're all about a sustained winning culture that deals with 3 important things: acquisition of talent, developing talent, and giving that talent an opportunity to thrive. And underneath that, there's a whole lot of millions of dollars spent. We have 7 campuses that cost millions of dollars to operate. We have Progressive Field. We have our 12-month complex in Goodyear, Arizona. We have the finest facility in the Dominican. Every team in baseball has an academy in the Dominican Republic. Ours is absolutely the finest. And then our 4 minor league teams. Quick story, Chris Antonetti, who runs all of our baseball, goes to Paul and says, we need to upgrade our presence in the Dominican. For those of you that know baseball, that area of the world is where the best baseball players come from. Not quite 30% of, I think it's 26% of the 780 major leaguers right now come from the Dominican, from Venezuela. Well, I should say outside the U.S. That includes Japan, Mexico, etc. 20 different countries represented on major league rosters. We needed to upgrade our presence. So Paul says, yes, I'll do it. How much? He thinks $17 million to build what we need nowadays with robotic cameras and state-of-the-art technology, sports science, etc. And he said, do me a favor. He said, of the 88 to 100 kids that we're going to bring in and live in this complex, 1% might wear Cleveland across their check, if that. They better be better men when they leave us than when they arrive. Last year we had a graduation ceremony of 26 kids out of that program in spring training. We set up a riser. Tito and Chris and Paul announced their name. They walked across the stage and they got their GED certificate. And that's the kind of owner you have. Somebody that cares about the young men in addition to trying to put a championship team on the field and win a World Series. So let's talk about how we go about doing that. Sustained winning culture. Again, acquiring talent, developing them, giving them opportunity to play. Spending all the money on the resources of our 7 campuses. We can't give one player $30 million a year. Doesn't make sense. And for those of you who might happen to listen to sports talk radio, I'd ask you not to. They don't know what they're talking about when it comes to the economic realities. There's 15, 16 of us in middle market baseball, and then there's the major markets. That's just the way it is. It's not an excuse. We just have to operate differently. So how do we operate differently? Well, we decide that we need to spend our money in, most companies would call it research and development. We call it player development with, again, all the things necessary to provide the resources to have an athlete be the best they can be. One of the stats that you're going to learn, and I will quiz you on, is the following. The Dolans have owned again for 24 years. In those 24 years, in all of baseball, they ranked 9th most wins out of 30 teams. I think being in the top 10 in a middle market, when you look at the list, there's only 3 of us in the top 10 in all of baseball, middle market teams. In the American League, we're ranked 5th. One other middle market team. Last 11 years, the Los Angeles Dodgers are the only team in baseball to win 1,000 games combined the last 11 years. New York Yankees are at 940 going into this year. The Houston Astros are at 922. And you can put an asterisk next to their name. Your Cleveland Guardians are 4th at 921. So if you do the math, the New York Yankees are only 19 wins better than us the last 11 years. And do you know how much more money they've spent than us on players in the last 11 years? And this is no BS. $1 billion. $1 billion more on players the last 11 years to get 19 more wins. So what does that say? It says our guys know what the hell they're doing. They deserve the benefit of the doubt when we make moves. We always try to put a winning team on the field. We haven't gone through the years like last year with Kansas City when they won 52 games. And the year before they only won 59 games. And the year before they only won 61 games. Baltimore losing 100 games in a row for 5 years. I can't imagine us doing that in our market. And what kind of support we would end up having even at the end when you came out of the tunnel and there was some promise. I don't know what our town would be like. So we've always tried to make sure that we put a solid ball club on the field. I think all you can ask of an organization is when we go to spring training, you have a sense that we are a legitimate contender to win our division and play baseball in October. And then when October hits, you hope you're healthy and you hope that you get a little bit lucky. 7th game of a World Series, some people will say when the rain came, and Chicago was able to regroup after Rajah Davis hit that remarkable homer against Mr. Chapman to tie the game up. Unfortunately, a lot of people forget, after Raj hit that 2-run homer, the very next hitter hit a double. We were one swing away in the bottom of the 8th, taking the lead. And Cody Allen that year was unstoppable as a closer that postseason. So we would have gone to the top of the 9th with feeling pretty good about getting that elusive World Series that all of us want. But we put ourselves in a position to do so. Lastly, before I open up to questions, I just always have to talk about Jose Ramirez. Jose Ramirez, I was just at opening day of Jose Ramirez Field down by Clark Field. Gorgeous field, turf field. There's now 4 that we've been involved with field turf to get baseball going. We've got a program in place to get some girls softball field turf facilities going this summer. You got Jim Tomey's over at Brookside, CC Sabathia Field over at Luke Easter Park. We have Jose Ramirez down at Clark Field and League Park over in the Huff neighborhood at the historic League Park where the Baseball Heritage Museum is. We're at opening day, Lincoln West High School played Garrett Morgan in the opening day of Jose Ramirez Field, which was pretty cool. Jose committed to us when he left millions and millions of dollars on the table as a free agent. And he committed to this city, he committed to this organization and his teammates. And one of the things we went to him, again, the kind of owner, he said, to thank you, we're going to build this field in your honor in the largest Hispanic neighborhood in the state of Ohio. And we're also going to build one in your hometown in the Dominican Republic. You know, they're $2.5 million at least each. So it's not an insignificant build, but it's so important. We believe, and thankfully we have it in Jose, your highest paid player better be your best person. It matters. Give you an example. This year in spring training, brand new manager, young coaching staff, the youngest team in baseball, which we are right now. Our whole spring training was on skill development. We were doing things that they do in the minor leagues in spring training. Drills. One of the drills, amazing drill, get these balls that are between the size of a baseball and a softball, plastic with one set big dimples, the other set smaller dimples, and they go shooting out of these things like tennis ball machine, but they go shooting onto the ground. And near home plate, and you'd stand between first base line and the dugout, 2 lines, and guys start at first base and they move forward as these things are coming at them. And they're scooting all over because of the dimples. Well, Jose Ramirez thought this was the greatest thing in the world. And the moment he said this was one of the most fun aspects, because you're neck and neck with a guy going down, you're trash talking with that guy about who's got the best hands, who caught it, who just deflected it. And the moment he was into it, you had 80 other guys thinking this was the greatest thing in the world. That's what one great leader can do for your baseball team. I texted Albert Bell last night because Jose passed him on the all-time doubles list and is one shy of passing him on the multi-hit game list in the history of our franchise. He didn't text me back last night. But he did the day before when he said, who owns the club record for the most 3-homer games? And normally when he texts me, the answer is him. He just wants somebody to verify that we remember he was awesome. And immediately I went, Joe Carter. It ain't you. I said, if you think it was you, you're wrong. It was Joe Carter, my friend. And I said, you actually hit Twice you did it with Baltimore when you took off, when you went out of town. But Hosey is just the most remarkable leader. We're so fortunate to have the kind of human being, and we're working hard to get him to be comfortable in front of a microphone to speak English. You can have a conversation with him in the locker room, go sit down and you'll talk to him in English, but man, you put that microphone in front of them and they just don't want to look silly. And that's the whole basis of it. In our Dominican Academy, we have classrooms. The kids have to go to class in the morning and achieve certain things before they're allowed in the weight room, in the batting cages, pitching tunnels out on the field. That's all part of wanting to provide a holistic approach to making these kids, these young men better when they leave us than when we brought them into our organization. We feel good about the team that we have. We did not make any splash this off season. We want to give our young players a chance to play. And how do you do that? How do you find out if a young athlete can play the game of baseball at the highest level? You got to give them a chance. You got to allow them, and you have to be patient with the number of at-bats it takes, or the number of innings it takes for a pitcher to show that they can make an impact on a championship caliber winning baseball team. So we're excited about who we are. Again, fourth most wins in all of baseball, with the team right in front of us having an asterisk attached to its name. We feel pretty good about how we go about doing our business. With that, does anybody want to be Stephen Kwan and lead off with the first question? Yes, sir.
The bunting, is that a lost art? Is that disappearing from all of baseball? Because it looks like, I'm looking back at teams that bunted when they couldn't hit the long ball. They bunted and they found a way to get those extra runs. And it seems like it's just a turn out now that it doesn't exist anymore.
Well, there's an interesting philosophy in the game of baseball. There's some who believe the game of baseball is based on who can get the 27 outs the fastest. Most people think it's scoring more runs. But a lot of people think it's who can get the 27 outs the fastest. So you're on offense, why are you giving up an out? That's just a philosophy. So that's part of it. And the other part of it is these kids are so big and strong now. Put the bat on the ball and see what happens. You'll see us probably, under Tito, we had the most sacrifice hits. I think we're in the top 3 in sacrifice hits in the American League year after year after year. That we did a little bit more. We don't do it a whole lot. You have to pick and choose. So there's a couple different reasons.
One more quick.
Yeah.
If I'm allowed. 83 pitches the other day for, I grew up with the pitchers.
Sure.
Mickey Lowe is going 10 innings and 100, and he grabbed the ball back. Are those days gone?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, there's, again, more than one reason. You have a 13-man pitching staff, so you have 8 guys in your bullpen. You have guys sitting down in the bullpen that the adage in our business is a pitcher rusts out. They don't wear out. So you better use them. So you better get them up. Not only that, you got guys sitting down there that throw 99 miles an hour. And to come in for an inning after they've just seen a guy for 5 innings, and you bring in some guy, all of a sudden he's throwing 99 miles an hour, that changes the face of the game. That's why it's much harder to hit nowadays. DiBiasio and all those guys, I used to have this argument with Bob Feller in the press box. I'd say, Bob, Joe DiBiasio got to face you 4 times every time you pitched, so he could learn. He goes, nowadays, DiBiasio would only see the starting pitcher twice, and he'd see 4, maybe 3 different pitchers throwing 3 different ways every game. Makes it harder to hit. And that's the reason you don't. Plus, there will be strength and conditioning people who say the starters today give their maximum effort on every single pitch. And I used to ask Bob Feller about that. He goes, oh yeah. He goes, why would I do maximum effort to the 7, 8, 9 hitters when I knew I could get them to ground out to second base on the second pitch? And I could save my arm so I could pitch 9 innings. These kids go at it, and that's probably, yesterday we had a guy go 6 2/3. It was too bad he couldn't finish and get to 7 innings pitched to save the bullpen. Yes, sir.
And pitch clock, do you think it hurts the game or improves the game?
First time in my 46 years, the media, the players, the umpires, front offices, everybody, the fans, were in complete alignment and in agreement that the pitch clock, larger bases, the new scheduling format, the no shift were awesome for the game of baseball. We took the non-baseball stuff out of the game with the pitch clock. You know, a pitcher stands on the mound and he's ready to go, and the hitter's in the batter's box and he steps out. And he starts playing with his batting gloves and getting ready, and then he'll step back in, and now the pitcher's mad, so he steps off the rubber. And now they got this little nuance going. Well, that's not baseball. No one thought that show of machismo is baseball. So let's cut that. Let's get it out of the game. And so games were a half hour quicker. And again, the word beer, we were all concerned we weren't going to sell enough beer and hot dogs and food because the games are a half hour shorter. And you know what we learned? Because everything's digital and we know exactly when you walk in for a 7-10 game, we know you showed up at 6:32 prior to the game. We know that. We know exactly how many thousands of people are in the building every single minute. And we know where they go. We know what concession stands they go to. We know all of that so that we can be prepared, obviously. And people ended up coming early. People showed up about 20 minutes earlier on average than they did the year before, because they knew their time with the game was going to be 2 hours, 40 minutes instead of 3 hours, 10 minutes. So they just added on to the early part of their experience to enjoy our product. And pardon me? Yes, front loading. Yes, sir.
You talked about the experience at the stadium, but the TV is not.
It's a ballpark, just so you know. Yes. Words matter, and people get mad at me when I'm a stickler. But that thing on the lakefront's a stadium. We're a ballpark. That's intimate. We are an intimate facility, a ballpark. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's quite all right. You gave me a chance to do a little teaching. Oh, Bally's, yeah, the TV issue. Well, this year, it's like nothing has changed. It's all the same. Have no idea what's happening next year. Have no idea. No idea what's happening. Will Major League Baseball take us over? And, would we find a different carrier? It's going to be interesting to see what. But believe me, you're going to be able to watch us on TV. We will not allow the scenario in which Guardians baseball isn't available as much as it is today. So, yes.
Yeah. Do you ever think MLB will work a salary cap?
Nope.
Major League Baseball will never, ever, ever have a salary cap. The union is too strong, which is fine. One of the things baseball has worked hard to do is competitive balance. The first thing we did in our industry There was a time when the people like the New York Yankees could have 10 farm teams. So not only could they corner the market on free agent signings in the big leagues, they could go sign as many young athletes and have 10 farm teams. Where middle market teams, we had 5. So baseball went and said every team has to only allowed 4 farm teams. The next thing they did, international signing. There used to be a frenzy, free-for-all. Anybody outside the United States, you could just pay the most money for the star. Not Japan. They have a specific way they go about allowing their players out of their contracts in Japan to be employed in the United States. But elsewhere, the teams with the most money could go sign whomever they wanted. International signing money is now equal. Everybody has the most. How you spend it is up to you. You see some 16-year-old kid who you think is the next coming of Ken Griffey Jr., and he's in Venezuela, and you can give him all your money and spend it all on one guy, or split it up amongst 10 players. The other one is this spring, we had 185 athletes in Goodyear, Arizona. Only 165 are allowed in our organization. Every team is now limited to 165 players. Competitive balance. So sadly, we had to tell 20 kids that their dream of being a professional baseball player, at least with us, was over. So those are things baseball is doing from a competitive balance standpoint. We have the #1 draft pick this year. By luck. It wasn't we had the worst record in baseball. We had a 1 in 40 chance to have our name picked out of the jar, and it happened. Because the union thought some teams like Kansas City, Detroit, Baltimore, even Houston, the Cubs, tanked for a few years to get that top pick, that they do a lottery now. That if you do have the top pick, you get, for example, 20 ping pong balls. The second pick gets 17, and you keep going down, and we maybe in that scenario had 1. And it ended up, we never ever have had, since 1965 when the draft was created, we've never had the #1 draft pick. So this will be very interesting to see what our guys, again, if you're a baseball freak, do you go get a pitcher or do you go get a stud first baseman, outfielder? But what do you do? If there's, and what I've heard is there's no Ken Griffey Jr. or Barry Bonds or Alex Rodriguez or even Bobby Witt Jr., who's a shortstop at Kansas City, that there really isn't one guy who just everybody's drooling over saying, well, there's a superstar, automatic. He could jump from high school to the big leagues right now. There just isn't really that guy. But some pretty darn good baseball players out there. Yeah, Mr. Toms.
New manager for the first time in
Yeah.
a long time.
Yeah.
What's the vibe like in the locker room?
Steven Vogt is a heck of a guy. How different did we go from a mid-60-year-old veteran guy to a 39-year-old who just was playing 2 years ago? The cool thing about Steven Vogt is a catcher, for one. 10 years a catcher in the big leagues, 2-time All-Star. Catchers make about 150 decisions a game, so they're the ones who also have to tell the manager when they're on the mound with the pitcher, and the manager turns to the catcher and says, is he done? Has he got anything in the tank? And he has to be honest and really piss off a teammate by saying, yeah, he doesn't have it anymore, Skip. You got to get him out. So catchers have to do those sorts of things. as the leader. Plus, he didn't start playing in the bigs till he was 27. So he wandered through the minor leagues coming out of college. And once he made it to the big leagues and he gets hurt, he realized he didn't know how long his career was going to be. So in Milwaukee, they allowed him to sit in on all the draft meetings, sit in the draft, sit on the bench when he wasn't playing, to be a pseudo bench coach. So in his mind, he was already thinking, all right, what do I need to learn to build up my resume that when my years of playing are over, that I could be considered as a manager in this sport. Most people like Steven Vogt take over 100 lost teams. And he took over a team that I just said, where do we rank in the last 11 years? Fourth, thank you very much. Yeah. So he's taking over a team that's had some sustained winning culture. So he knows he's in a pretty good spot. And he really has brought in a fun attitude with the youngest team in baseball. We are still the youngest team in baseball. Yep. Yes, sir.
Will fans get a chance to buy some of the seats as they're pulled out?
I don't think so. We're in the midst of trying to figure that out. The hardest part is when you rip them out of the cement is saving them. It's just such a hard process. Instead of just going in and ripping the hell out of them and getting it done. We couldn't do it this year because of all the things that we had to get done. We just couldn't take the time to be gentle with them. Don't know if we're going to be gentle with them next year.
To talk about the experience of baseball, how long can we expect to hear Hammy called?
I think Hammy might have, after this year, maybe 2. He's third. You know, it's funny. Rick and Hammy are the 2 longest broadcasters in the history of our franchise. They're both starting their 35th years as broadcasters in our organization. Herbie Score was at 34. So they tied him last year and they bypassed him this year. But Hammy's the best. And we'll be in Cooperstown. We'll be in the Hall of Fame, the broadcaster's wing for sure, one of these days. But I think he only has, at least contractually, and then if he decides, you know, he's on that Joe Tate contract. You tell us when you're done, when you're ready to walk away. Just like Tito was, you know. Tito, you tell us when you just realize you have to go take care of yourself. And he made the right choice. Tito needed to go take care of himself, health-wise. Sandy Alomar, good question. I think maybe 10 years ago, Sandy wanted to become a big league manager. Not anymore. Not in this new wave of analytics and the job. I think he loves his life. He's a cyclist. He loves his job. He wants to win a World Series in a Cleveland uniform more than anything else, instead of going somewhere else and trying to help another team do that. But I think it just sometimes that want passes by. And I remember him telling me when it got down to him and Tito, and we were chatting, and he said, I could probably share this now, but he said back then, he goes, I called up Mark and Chris and said, you got a chance to hire Tito, you better hire him instead of me. What the hell's wrong with you? As long as I have a job. And so they were connected at the hip for 11 years, and I think the want to be a skipper just went away. Yes?
After Major League, your favorite baseball movie?
Well, it's funny. I had script approval of that movie. I get a call from Hank Peters, our president. And he says, Bobby, come back to my office. I got something crazy I need to talk to you about. And I said, all right. So I walk back, and he's got a stack of paper. Got to remember, this is the late 80s. And a stack of paper. And he shoves it towards me, and he goes, for some reason, people at Major League Baseball thinks it's a good idea they do a movie about us. He goes, it's all yours. And now here's how weird a world we live in. The producer, director, writer of Major League, a guy named David Ward, grew up in Shaker Heights, which is why Cleveland Indians were his favorite team, which is why he wrote it. You know what his movie was that he wrote, produced, and directed right before Major League? He won an Academy Award for The Sting. So he goes from The Sting to Major League. You're like, my God. Now the co-producer, a guy named Chris Chesser, and this is where life is weird. So they fly into Cleveland. I'm meeting with them, taking them around the ballpark for shots and doing all those sorts of things and having fun. And Chris Chesser stops me and he goes, you don't remember me? And of course, and I said, no. And he goes, well, you wouldn't, because this would have been, probably 10 years ago. But when I was in freshman, sophomore in high school, I used to ride my bike to High Corbett Field during your guys' spring training in Tucson. And he goes, twice you came up to me and allowed me to be the bat boy for one of the games, because I was always hanging around trying to steal baseballs when they were hit over the fence, home runs and batting practice. It's like, what kind of world do we live in? And then I had script approval for Moneyball. That was different. It was on a laptop. They would shoot a scene 3 or 4 different ways, and they'd send all 4, and I would click, yes, you could use this, yes, you could use this, no, you can't use this. You're making Mark Chaparro look like an idiot. You're not using that. And if I didn't respond to them in I had 8 hours. If I didn't respond to them in 8 hours, they could use any one of them they wanted. So I'd look at it right before midnight, and I'd wake up at 7 a.m., immediately go to the laptop, making sure Mark wouldn't hate me for the rest of my life, that on the screen he's portrayed. But my baseball, I don't know, there's something about Sandlot that, because my kids, nephews, nieces, we'd all sit around and watch that movie. The one thing about Major League that I liked, Charlie Sheen is an athlete. He was a pitcher. He was a community college, high school pitcher, was hoping someday to get drafted. And so there was a realism to him as Wild Thing, because his motion and everything was athletic.
How crazy was it getting ready for the eclipse?
One of the funniest questions in conversations with our friends at NASA, you got to remember, these are people that put people on the moon. They said, you think we could get the 7th inning stretch to happen at 3:13 p.m.? We're like, well, I don't think we're good enough. We think we do our jobs pretty damn well, but I don't think we're good enough. No, they were just kidding. They said, wouldn't that be the way to do it? Because as we were trying to figure out, how do we play nice with the city, and obviously with NASA, when do we start? Because 3-4 years ago when we realized this was happening, we thought, how historic for us to have opening day when the next time this is going to happen isn't until 2444, that the path of totality is coming across Cleveland, that maybe we could have opening day, and we petitioned Major League Baseball to do so, and they agreed. And then as we got into it, we're like, did we do the right thing here? But it's just, again, hey, we're a major city, and we're going to have lots of stuff going on, so we deal with it. So you're in a car in a traffic jam for a few minutes, who cares? Deal with it, right? Or stay home.
What's your favorite Manny Ramirez story?
Oh my, I get called into our controller's office. And he said, Bobby, you need to go down and talk to Manny. He hasn't cashed a paycheck yet. And it was June 1st. And so there were 4 paychecks. Back then, players were paid April through the end of September. They were paid by check, no direct deposit back then. And the traveling secretary, Mike Segi, would walk up to a player, hand him your paycheck, and you would sign that you received it twice a month. If that didn't happen, you were a free agent the very next day. That were the rules of baseball. So obviously very important that we hand-delivered. So I go down and I said, Manny, how are we doing for money? He goes, hey, I'm doing great, Bobby D. You want some? And I'm like, no, I don't, thank you, very kind. But, Mike Segi walks around and gives you these white envelopes, and what are you doing with them? And he rummages through his bottom of his locker where the 10 pair of spikes and 50 batting gloves and, little tins of tobacco and all the things going on down there. And he starts pulling out these 4 white envelopes. And I said, can I take these upstairs? And he goes, yeah, sure. So I walked back up to John Hart and Dan O'Dowd's office, and I said, we have an issue here. We failed this young man. And immediately they were like, that's the agent's job. He has an agent who's supposed to take care of him. And they don't. They sign a contract and they bolt. And I said, but still, he's one of us. Don't we? So I called a friend of mine at CSU, bilingual. She was in the language department, and said, I need your help. Can you meet me at lunch hour at the ballpark? We got to take Manny over to the Key Bank on West 25th, the bilingual bank on West 25th. And I told her I've got some checks, so we needed to start a checking account, a bank account. And so we did that for Manny. And from that day forward, Mark Shapiro, who ended up being our GM and president, was our farm director back then. And from that day forward, he instituted this cultural assimilation program in our organization for kids that needed a little extra help. So that oddity of Manny being Manny, most fun-loving kid you ever, hardest working him, to watch he and Albert Bell and Jim Thome and Carlos, they would hit for hours. I mean, spring training in Winter Haven, they'd be there at 6:30 in the morning. Other players are rolling in at 7:45. They've already got an hour of hitting in, just lathered up. Their hands are raw. Just unbelievable work ethic, those guys. I mean, I think Manny could be considered the greatest right-handed hitter of his generation. With the lefties being Griffey Jr. and Barry Bonds of that group. Travis Fryman once told me that, and I'll end it on this one with a Manny story. Tell you what kind of athlete he was. For baseball players, your bat is the throne. It's the chalice. It's the most important thing in your life as a hitter, is your bats. Albert Bell used to put his bats in sanitary socks and tie them so no one could touch them. No one could go near him. So Travis says one game, he always hit behind Manny, batting fourth. We go 1, 2, 3 in our inning, so the next inning he comes off the field, takes his hat and his fielding glove, his gloves, sunglasses, puts them in the same spot in the dugout every time so he knows exactly where to go to get it when it was time to get back out on the field. Goes over to the bat rack and he can't find his bat. He's on deck and there's no bat. So he knows he put his gamer in the bat rack, and he's yelling at the bat boys. And he even said to me, he goes, I was thinking of swearing. Travis Fryman never swore. God-fearing guy, faith-based, most wonderful human being. He goes, I almost swore at those kids because I couldn't find my bat. And then next thing I know, I look up and Manny has my bat. He's using my bat. And so he doubles off the wall with my bat. And I'm thinking, this is little, I can't do Little League. I can't go up and use the same bat that the guy just used in the big leagues. So he's at second with no outs. So he goes, I took Jim Tomey's bat, who he wasn't playing, and I dribbled one to second so Manny could get to third, which is what you do as a team player. So the next time I run in, and instead of doing my routine, I run right over the bat rack, grab my bat, and then do my routine with my glove and all of that. And I just kept an eye on him. He used 4 different bats that day. Not once did he use his own, and went 4 for 4. And Travis looked at me, he goes, you know this game, nobody can do that. He goes, nobody does that because of the different lengths, the different weights. Unbelievable. That's how good a hitter Manny Ramirez was. Thank you, everybody. This was awesome.